desk on the ground floor. Mr. Crowthers from Belfast to the airport information desk, please. This is a special announcement for passengers. Please ensure that they do not leave their baggage unattended at any time.
Announcing the departure of British Airways Flight 614 to Zurich. All passengers should proceed with customs and immigration.
Afternoon, thank you. Your name, sir?
Schumacher. E.F. Schumacher.
You don't have any baggage? If you'd like to go to gate number 18, your flight is boarding. Thank you.
Yes,
Passengers for Vienna, Budapest and Zurich should now be in the departure lounge.
E.F. Schumacher. Fritz Schumacher to his friends. Like all good revolutionaries, he travels light. Fritz Schumacher would reverse the progress of the 20th century. He deals with machinery and with God. There are very few perfect machines. One of them is the oarlock. It is a gentle instrument that unites man and water. It is dignified and economic, and this pleases Fritz Schumacher.
I am an economist, an organizer, a technologist. The real problem of our society is not the technical, the economic. It's, I believe, philosophical. It's an enormous confusion about our deepest convictions. On the one hand, we're told just a cosmic accident that the human race exists. On the other hand, we are given religious instruction and so on. And have all these churches and great traditions, wonderful art. And so we're living in total confusion.
Until he was about 45 years of age, Fritz Schumacher, like all good economists, was dedicated to growth. To stand still was to stagnate. To become smaller was to die. He was enormously successful, a prime mover in Europe's post-war economic miracle. Then he decided that the world was making a monstrous mistake. Big, he said, could indeed be bad. Small, he said, is beautiful. With these words, he became one of the few original thinkers of the 20th century. It was decided in some official circles that Schumacher had suddenly become a harmless old fool, of great appeal, no doubt, to people who liked to hook their own rugs. Then somebody remembered that Schumacher had predicted the world energy crisis 18 years before it happened, and now he gets letters inviting him to the White House. It is often assumed that Schumacher has come to despise all forms of machinery. Not so, says Schumacher. Some machinery is beautiful.
been doing this about 5 years. We've now got it to work reliably. It's very simple. I mean, when I explained the valves, it no doubt sounded awfully complicated. It isn't really. The column of water drops, so one valve opens by gravity. The column pushes it back, clonk. It is then trapped by this little toggle arrangement, and it then lets the other valve open.
Schumacher's kind of machine can now be found all over the world. They pump water, crate eggs, or warm houses. They make man's life easier, but they do not deprive him of work. They do not rob him of dignity. They do not strip him of natural resources.
So the wind pressure tries to force the rotor out of the wind. The spring holds the rotor into the wind. When the wind pressure on the rotor becomes large enough at the controlled speed at which we want the rotor to furl, the spring is no longer strong enough to hold the rotor, and it will actually pivot out of the wind.
Schumacher believes that technology is good where it is appropriate. His motorized wheelbarrow, for example, is appropriate for a 67-year-old man with a bad back. But the modern technological explosion, he maintains, has grown out of all proportion to human need. Man has created a Frankenstein monster, and he has come to worship this perversion of God.
Our children are brought up that what they really admire are all sorts of mechanical contraptions. And if they hear for the first time a statement like a rocket that takes you to the moon is very, very crude compared with this mosquito or that hen, I think you're teasing them. It has never occurred to them to look at it this way. You know? So they've got everything upside down. What we can fully understand, what we can make ourselves, we don't have to have any reverence for. We can replicate it. But what we can't make, that we have to treat as a marvel, as the marvel, the miracle it is.
I first met Fritz Schumacher at a Buddhist monastery near San Francisco. I think that's symbolic of the paradox and the contradiction that often flows from his ideas, but also the
Governor Jerry Brown of California, where bigger has always been better.
And what struck me both about his ideas and about himself was really the utter simplicity that was contained and that was expressed. It is a paradox that in a state as big and as prosperous and as growth-oriented as California, the notion of intermediate technology would catch on with the enthusiasm that it has.
George McRoby is the chief bearer of the Schumacher message. He carries it to Siamese farmers, African kings, British Columbian businessmen. But he always comes home to feed his compost heap.
That's how it breaks down. Here we've got a pair of old woolen trousers. Anything that's ever grown can go back into compost. So if it's ever was newspaper, or provided it's been organic in its time, you can put it back into the compost and it'll break down again.
How long does it take to break the pants down?
That would take, well, it depends what you put on top. But these should be consumed within about a couple of months.
His little office in London is dedicated to the proposition that any intelligent fool can make things bigger and more complex, but it takes a touch of genius and a lot of courage to move in the opposite direction.
The trip to the Navajo, trip to Winnipeg.
McRoby and Schumacher are the champions of low technology. They point out that examples of high technology now lie in ruins across Asia and Africa. Nowhere in these offices will you find the plans for the elephant canning factory that had to close down when they discovered that hardly anybody wanted to eat elephant and fewer still wanted to put them in cans. Nowhere on these shelves will you find the plans for the plastic shoe factory that made 40 people rich and put 5,000 shoemakers out of business. These well-meaning schemes to elevate the third world sprang from the brightest brains of the great industrial nations.
These very, very clever people are at trial. And I tend to be impatient with them, which doesn't help. I accuse many of my fellow economists as rearranging, with great acumen, rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. You see, I wish they would at least do something with their hands to get a real feel of things again. If they come and turn real life situations into mathematics, all the life is taken out of it. That I find a great trial. Too many of our academics have got stuck with a concept. The Buddhists say Buddhism is a finger pointing at the moon. For goodness sakes, study the moon, not the finger.
And it's very difficult to achieve a simple answer to a question like, what do people want out of life? Okay, which is...
As it is with all great new ideas, Schumacher's teachings have spawned a bewildering proliferation of conferences, meetings, and workshops.
Income, jobs.
They aim at getting the world back on a human scale, but the disciples must constantly be on guard against creating their own academic swamp.
And so on. I came across one paper here, it was in the pamphlet, called Socially Actionable Consensus Happiness Requisites. Somebody said something about jargon.
Cutting through all the high-flown theory is a single terrifying realization. We now produce as many manufactured goods in each 4-year period as all of mankind produced from the dawn of history until 1945. And yet there are more miserable people on Earth than ever before. Gross national product is the conventional measuring stick of the economist. In the name of gross national product, says Schumacher, modern man will resort to any degree of technological violence and human degradation. Although Schumacher addressed himself originally to the mismanagement of the developing nations, it soon became evident that he was speaking to all of mankind. In Newfoundland, where Schumacher's teachings were first embraced, the best and the worst of the technological age are readily apparent. The Urco plant at Long Harbor on Placentia Bay. The Urco plant takes phosphate rock from Florida and coke from Germany and creates elemental phosphorus. It is a job so dirty that few communities will let it take place. After the first year, the herring catch had to be destroyed because the herring had turned red. Then they saw that the trees turned black and died. And then there were the stories of mutant rabbits. A dentist comes once a week because the phosphorus can endanger the bone structure of the worker. The slag, which is sold to the local people for fill, has been found to be radioactive. It has been decided that from time to time, they will take urine samples from the children. This is high technology. It feeds only 425 families, and it uses as much power as it takes to light up the city of St. John's itself.
Most of the energy we require is quite gentle energy. A very high percentage of all energy required is less than 100 degrees Celsius. Why then start off with a nuclear reaction which has 1,000,000 degrees in order finally to get 30 degrees room temperature? How is it that our ancestors created all this tremendous culture, these fantastic cathedrals, when GNP, gross national product, was a tiny fraction of what it is now? And now, the richer allegedly we get, we find it an intolerable strain even to keep these cathedrals in repair. How did they do it? They did it with minimal technology. And then you notice all sorts of things. That we have mesmerized ourselves with our technology. And for instance, if you want to build anything, even a small hut, you need Portland cement. And Portland cement can only be made in very large factories with very high capital equipment, very great fuel input. And then perhaps you wake up and say 100 years ago, Portland cement didn't exist. And they built all these cathedrals and the Taj Mahal and so on without Portland cement.
"39 miles from the Urco plant, the abandoned oil refinery at Come by Chance. When it opened, they chartered the liner Queen Elizabeth to christen the new port. And she was followed by the Japanese oil tankers, longer than the town itself. And Come by Chance was bright with promise.
Well, I was drinking beer down Carbonear, wondering about a job. Manpower sent me to Bay Despair, but I didn't like it out there. So I hope there's a chance in Come by Chance. Hope there's a chance out there. I hope there's a chance in Come by Chance, 'cause I don't want to go to Labrador. Well, me wife and me kids, we moved to St. John's.
50 split-level bungalows were built for executives. But by the time they were finished, there was nothing left to be an executive of.
Hope there's a chance out there. I hope there's a chance in Come by Chance, 'cause I don't want to go to Labrador.
Just why it closed down depends on who you talk to. Whether it was the world price of oil, mismanagement, or worse, it was totally out of the hands of the people of Come by Chance. The bankruptcy receivers keep a little oil in the pipes in case anybody wants to buy it. It'll cost $535 million to get it going again.
Well, I hope there's a chance in Come by Chance. Hope there's a chance out there. I hope there's a chance in Come by Chance, 'cause I don't want to go to Churchill Falls.
There is, however, a place for technology in Come by Chance.
We're past the talking stage, boy. We're into the nuts and bolts of this. Now, how are you getting on with it? What are you doing? How's it going?
Well, we've got it on paper now, Don, or the better part of it, I suppose. But what we're hoping to accomplish right now...
A professional fisherman has to bake 2,000 hooks before he goes fishing. And nobody's ever figured out a way of doing it except by hand. Don Andrews thinks he's getting close.
So that we can drag this hook through. The hook will be controlling the timing through the spokes.
Yeah, I got it.
Right? Bring it on through.
Yeah.
Now with this here in motion, the same time...
Schumacher didn't invent small-scale technology. It started with the wheel.
Exactly.
I agreed with his theory, naturally, and I was wondering, and he agreed with mine, because I've been striving all my life to take the slavery and the drudgery out of the old-fashioned fish-making. everybody getting out on the flakes, picking them up one by one, putting them in piles and covering them over in stacks on the flake, which was killing labor, youngsters, oldsters, and everything else. And there's no wonder the people left the fishery at that time, because it was drudgery.
Don Andrews' rollout fish flake is a nice piece of low technology, a sight to gladden Schumacher's heart. And so is the sight of an age-old screw press, which is still the best way to get cod in a box. All of this is fine for a box of fish, but what about things like the motor car? The assembly line may be efficient, says Schumacher, but it may also be dehumanizing. But if that's the case, say the high priests of technology, how come a group of auto workers turned down a chance to make cars in small individual teams? You can buy my body, said one worker, but you're not going to buy my mind.
Well, I think it's very worrying if you get an increasing percentage of mankind becoming so unenterprising and passive. What's happened to them? I don't notice that children are born that way, so they're conditioned into this passivity. But that shows a very, very serious degeneration of the human race, which I think will also mean a disintegration of society. So, in the advanced societies, I am personally quite certain that the overall policy, after 100 years of de-skilling the work, must be re-skill the work, so that it becomes fun, something you can be proud of, where you can go home and say, I'm a real person, I've done a real job, I'm not just a machine minder. I think around 3 in the afternoon.
Schumacher gets 20 invitations a week. On a recent trip to the States, he gave 44 lectures. 60,000 people came to listen. Thousands more had to be turned away.
Yeah, I'll give you a precise time.
He is 67 years old and weary of traveling. When he got home from the last trip, his legs had become so badly swollen that he had to be carried off the plane.
Yes, 15:30.
There are many visitors. The former president of Mexico, Echeverria, arrives with his entourage from London.
Good afternoon, sir. It's a pleasure to meet you. It's a pleasure for him to be
Schumacher's book, Small is Beautiful, has been translated into 15 languages, and Echeverria has read it.
I hope my little book will now appear in Spanish.
¿Qué editorial? What is you remember the house?
The Italian edition has just appeared.
Dice que ya apareció la edición italiana.
Now, Small is Beautiful sounds good, but Il piccolo e bello sounds even better.
Dice que pequeño y hermoso suena bonito, pero piccolo y bello en italiano suena más bonito.
Well, one of our people, Harry Dickinson,
Yes, I'm getting his report for...
Yes.
Echeverria is looking for something to do. He has just tried and failed to become Secretary General of the United Nations. Now he's trying to become head of the Third World, and Schumacher's support is very important.
Maybe you know that he proposed to the United Nations in the name of Mexico the Charter of Economic Rights and Duties of the States.
En abril de 1972.
In April of 1972. These ideas have been approved. Have been approved for the international community. I have one. Yo tengo uno, pero está en este. This is the Charter of Economic Rights and Duties.
Oh, yes.
We have it in Spanish. We have another English text here. But we can send you one. Le podemos mandar uno.
I shall send this text.
You got my address.
If I may.
I will get it.
I think we can.
Yes, I think, you know, if one works for the poor, one has to work economically. Since I can't read it, I return it. But I only keep
Dice que no puede leer esta, que él espera que le mande.
De cualquier manera, se la quiero dejar.
He wants to give it to you in Spanish. Because
Anyway.
You may not know what the walnut.
Walnut. Son diferentes tipos de árboles. Walnut, ¿qué viene siendo?
¿Cuáles son los productos?
Nogal, ¿verdad?
Nuts.
Es nueces.
See.
Schumacher spent 3 years as a farm worker, and this, he once said, was his real university. He has planted a grove of nut trees on his property in the south of England. It is perhaps his greatest pride, his bequest to future generations of Schumachers.
Higher protein than wheat.
Más altas que el trigo.
It's one of the most important things. I'm not joking.
He has an abiding faith in family life.
Economists talk about mobility as a wonderful thing. Well, maybe it means rootlessness. Maybe it means you don't belong anywhere. I have myself a very great need for roots.
His first wife died. He remarried. He has 6 children. The oldest is 40. The youngest is 2. It is the 18th of May, 1977. 3.5 months from now, while on a train in Switzerland, Ernst Friedrich Schumacher will suffer a massive heart attack.
O God, you have called your son Ernst Friedrich from this life. Father of all mercy, fulfill his faith and hope in you, and lead him safely home to heaven, to be happy with you forever. We ask this through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever.
Thank you.